Hello, co-journeyers, and welcome back to The Truth So Help Me Good. I am your host, Barbara Landry, and together we explore some of the bigger questions about this journey we call life, with inspiration from my upcoming memoir, The Truth So Help Me Good. Welcome to Episode 7. This past week, some of us celebrated the shortest day of the year, known as the winter solstice. Not long before that, we turned back the clocks, gaining an hour of morning light, only to find that it was dark by 4:30 in the afternoon. I could feel the resistance in my body as I braced myself for another winter, still wearing my jean jacket outside, my personal protest against the cold and dark. But my resistance was not aligned with what was actually happening in nature. Instead, I found myself pushing against it, which made me curious. What is actually happening during the winter solstice? It has to do with the tilt of the Earth's axis, how the northern and southern hemispheres change in proximity to the sun as the Earth revolves around it, and that on the winter solstice, the northern hemisphere is tilting its furthest away from the sun. In fact, they say the sun appears to stop as it reaches its farthest point to the south, before it then changes direction to move north, giving the day its name, which is from the Latin words sol, meaning sun, and sisto, meaning stop. This shortest day of the year serves as a pause. That seems really big, and perhaps is something worth paying attention to. I know this is true for me, as I am someone who likes to do things. The busier I am, the better. Not often taking time for pauses. But something happened this past week that has caused me to examine this more closely. Rather than attend a holiday gathering, I decided that I wanted to spend some time alone at home. I was glad that I made a decision to do what I thought was best for me, rather than feel pressured to do what I thought I should do. So there I was, by myself, and as the day wore on, I started to experience what felt like loneliness, to the point that I got anxious about my decision to stay home by myself. It was uncomfortable. I watched myself trying to find distractions through busyness. I pulled a book and training manual off of my shelf from a workshop I had given years earlier. I decided I would begin to prepare for a new workshop that I would offer after the holidays. I watched my desk become covered with books, notebooks, handbooks, and training manuals. I was even on the brink of submitting a program proposal when I stopped in my tracks. I paused. This time, I let the anxiety well up inside and felt it take me like a wave. Instead of looking for a distraction to avoid the feelings of discomfort, I just sat there and let myself feel it. After a moment or two, I looked at the stack of materials I had assembled for the workshop that I had imagined I would do, and in a moment of clarity realized that I did not really want to run another workshop, at least not now. I took the materials off of my desk and returned them to the shelf. I became conscious of the fact that I tried to create a distraction for myself to avoid sitting with the discomfort of loneliness. I came to this realization through my willingness to sit with the discomfort and take that pause. So you may be wondering, what does all of this have to do with the winter solstice? Well, what the winter solstice represents is the fact that in the natural world, we have seasons, we have cycles. We are all familiar with the idea, whether it be from the Bible or Simon and Garfunkel, that there is a time to sow and a time to reap, that everything on earth has its own time and its own season. It has its own purpose. For me, the season of cold, the season of darkness, is something that I have always had resistance to. And yet, if I take the time to understand its purpose in the natural world, there is something to be learned from its wisdom. The importance of the pause, the silence, the stillness, the space, is represented in a famous quote attributed to Claude Debussy that music is the space between the notes. The silence allows us to listen for the next note. Without the silence in between, the consecutive notes would be like a stream of run-on sentences and have no meaning. I wonder if this concept can be applied to our daily lives. Living is not solely comprised of our actions, but also in the pausing in between. When we pause, we are able to listen for the next action. Otherwise, our actions become like a stream of run-on sentences without meaning. We must take time to experience the silence in between. And so I was fortunate this past week to attend a winter solstice ritual and celebration facilitated by a member of my writing group. We gathered around the fire pit. We welcomed in the spirit of the four directions, Father Sun, Grandmother Moon, and allowed ourselves to be held in the darkness and to pause under the stars, to be with what is. We talked about the darkness. We spoke about our fear and the reluctance to look at the cycle of life that includes death. We set our intention to look beyond our fear and to find what it is the darkness has to teach us. The plants, in their starkness, feign death, when in fact they are but asleep, having stored energy during the season of growth in a place where their roots meet their stem. They have paused. They are listening for the next note, for the next action, and contain within themselves everything that is needed for growth. The frost-covered grass sparkled under the moonlight. The night was clear and still, and in the darkness there was light and beauty. Penny brought us to a place in the field where there was an opening in a stone wall that led to another field where there was a large pile of brush and decaying vegetation, now frozen under the moonlit sky. We were to imagine the opening as a portal to the underworld, and were invited, one by one, to go behind the pile where we would find a mirror and a light. We were invited to gaze into the mirror and compose a love letter to ourselves, and if help was needed, to draw a slip of paper from the jar that would inspire us. The invitation was about stepping into the darkness, touching the face of eternity, pausing in the stillness. When it was my turn, I walked to the pile and around it to the back. There I found a mirror, a candle, and a jar. A mat had been placed on the ground on which to kneel. I saw my reflection in the mirror and drew a slip of paper from the jar that contained the following words: How can I allow for stillness and simplicity in my life? Do I have that now? Do I want more of that? They were exactly the words that I needed to hear. They were the words that validated my experience of just days before. And so it is that I open myself to stillness, to the pause, only to find myself at home in the darkness. I would like to end this episode with a poem by Mary Oliver entitled Snowy Night. In this poem, she reminds us to pay attention and to be with what is present, whether we understand it or not. It invites us to welcome instead of to shun the dark, and be open to what we don't know, and instead step into wonder. Last night, an owl in the blue dark tossed an indeterminate number of carefully shaped sounds into the world, in which, 1/4 of a mile away, I happened to be standing. I couldn't tell which one it was, the bard or the great horned ship of the air. It was that distant. But anyway, aren't there moments that are better than knowing something? And sweeter? Snow was falling, so much like stars filling the dark trees, that one could easily imagine its reason for being was nothing more than prettiness. I suppose if this were someone else's story, they would have insisted on knowing whatever is knowable, would have hurried over the fields to name it. The owl, I mean. But it's mine, this poem of the night, and I just stood there, listening and holding out my hands to the soft glitter falling through the air. I love this world, but not for its answers. And I wish good luck to the owl, whatever its name. And I wish great welcome to the snow, whatever its severe and comfortless and beautiful meaning. Thank you, co-journeyers, for listening. I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care and be well.